We greatly appreciate you taking time away from your college basketball bracket to join us for another edition, a weekend of free agency in the new league year edition of Inside Coverage here on Yahoo. The how and the why, any and everything you need to know about the National Football League. My name is Andrew Siciliano, my wingman, wingwoman, wing reporter for the day, our Yahoo NFL senior writer, phoning in from New York, where is it snowing today, Jori Epstein? Like it was raining, now it's snowing. It was 70, now it's 30. Like, what's the deal there?
It's raining today, but on Thursday, I was literally on the phone with the source, and all of a sudden was like, whoa, and the source got confused, and I'm like, it's snowing, and it was just 70, and then it was hailing and raining, so we had every type of wintry mix on Thursday, but today, just some basic rain.
Yeah, it's this weird time of the year. Cleveland, for example, like 70 yesterday, golf weather, and then snowing today. Yesterday here in LA, beautiful 80 degrees. Today, like walls of fog coming in through the windows. I know first world problem in Los Angeles, but it's also this weird spot on the calendar as well. Like yesterday, we were 100 miles an hour for the first week of free agency. Today, we're kind of in this, I don't call it a dead or down period, because free agency is still very much on. Like, there are still very good football players, former Pro Bowlers, guys that could be in the Hall of Fame one day, out there in the free agent market. There are, by my count, 3 or 4 quarterbacks who I think will start games this year, still out there on the free agent market, yet it feels quiet. Like we are waiting for something new. We are waiting for an A.J. Brown trade. We'll get to that coming up in a second. We'll actually talk to Scott Turner, longtime NFL assistant, get his thoughts on A.J. Brown. We're waiting for Aaron Rodgers. We're waiting for Kirk Cousins. We're waiting for a lot of things, and we got something to start the day. Something a little interesting, at least. A guy that started week 1 a year ago at quarterback, Justin Fields, has been traded. The former first-round pick at the Chicago Bears, Justin Fields, gets sent at 27 years old, the 11th pick in 2021, to the Kansas City Chiefs. They don't give up much. They give up a late-round pick. They pick up about $3 million of the $11 million that Fields was owed. It was a one-year experiment that didn't even really last 1 year. Nothing worked last year in New York, but I do think potentially, Jori, that this could work in Kansas City. If Mahomes isn't ready week 1, you could do a lot worse than Justin Fields, and maybe Andy Reid can open up the offense a little bit and see what you could do with a highly mobile quarterback, a guy that once ran for 1,000 yards. And if Mahomes is ready, I give Andy Reid the same kind of credibility and foresight to use Justin Fields perhaps as an offensive weapon.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when I first saw this, I thought, is Andy Reid paying all of Justin Fields $10 million of the salary? Because if so, that would really suggest a level of belief. $3 million is not quite that, but it suggests that they wanted him, and they wanted him to be their guy who's going to be working with the ones through the offseason until Mahomes is ready, and they want him to contribute in the regular season in some way, whether that's spotting Mahomes a couple of games as he's coming back, or that is, as you said, being used as a weapon. And I had a coach tell me that as well, that they were like, I haven't heard that, but that's what I would do if I were Andy Reid and I had that ability. I think when I consider not Justin Fields' year with the Jets, but what he did with the Steelers 2 years ago, that to me is really the model here of Mike Tomlin didn't ask Justin Fields to carry the team. He asked him to use his athleticism, create a few great plays, have the threat of using his legs, and then you have a strong run game, you have a strong defense, and then you feel like you can win, even if you're not just running up the scoreboard 40 points a game. And that was really successful at the beginning of the year for Pittsburgh before Russell Wilson ultimately got healthy, and we saw Russell Wilson get that starting job back. And so now that you're Kansas City and you have Kenneth Walker and you've got some offensive line pieces, I think that's what you would do if you needed him to start the first couple of weeks.
Justin Fields is this perplexing. He's an enigma, to be honest with you. You go back to his first full season as starter. He finished 9th in the MVP balloting, which 9th year, I mean, you're not close to winning, but it shows you, and he ran for 1,000 yards that year, that he has shown an ability to be a game-changing weapon. We just don't see it enough in the passing game. And like, there's this crazy stat I saw today that like over the last 20 starts, Justin Fields has the fewest interceptions of any starting quarterback in the NFL over the last 20 starts. Well, that's because he doesn't throw the ball down the field. Like I was at a Browns Jets game. I know we're talking to Scott Turner coming up a little bit later, and Scott coached in that game, in which the Jets won the game and Justin Fields completed one pass beyond the line of scrimmage. One, the entire game. Now, you're not going to throw picks when everything is behind the line of scrimmage. I think Andy Reid can potentially unlock that. I don't know that he's going to turn him into Joe Montana, but you know, and this is kind of a tired theme these days. Like, hey, everyone needs to go to Kyle Shanahan or Kevin O'Connell. They need their year in quarterback rehab. I think this can really help the guy. I'm rooting for him. I like Justin. I think he was in a really bad situation last year. You have the owner, and Jori, you were there for this at the owners' meetings, throwing the quarterback under the
Yeah.
bus and saying, I don't want him to start anymore. But then who was it? Who correct me if who was the other quarterback? The other quarterback got banged up and then he had to play it. Like, it was Tyrod. I'm sorry.
Taylor.
How quickly we forget last year's Jets season. And then he's back there starting when the owner had already thrown him under the bus. Like, I can't imagine what that must have been like to go through.
Right. No, Justin Fields talked about, what was it, that he was crying in his closet. And anyone who's met Justin really since he was coming out of college, I didn't meet him in college, but I did meet him the summer before his rookie year and work with him on a story. I mean, great guy, really easy to root for, very earnest, very honest. And so, I mean, I want him to succeed. I think that from an athleticism standpoint, he's had a lot of experience. And we've seen that Justin is one of several quarterbacks who come into this league without a lot of experience starting at the college level, who maybe aren't fully ready to diagnose defenses at the NFL level in the way that they're expected to be and to have their arm like throwing into those tight windows. And that's not a knock on what Justin can be. But if a guy comes in with 4, 5, even 6 years of experience, what we're seeing with Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels and all that level, they're going to be ahead most likely of a guy like Justin Fields. And so then do you have someone who lets you grow and develop? Do you have the right cast to develop among? And so I'm excited about the prospect of what Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes could do with him. But really going back to that Pittsburgh tenure, when I think about their game against the Colts, and it was the Steelers game, and he had a passing touchdown, 312 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns that game. They ended up losing 27-24. But to me, in that game, we saw what Justin can do. In the same way that when I talk to people, I know we're going to get to Kyler Murray about, hey, well, maybe the play action can open up some of the windows to allow him to do it. I think Justin Fields, when he uses his mobility and shows that people have to respect that threat. Defenses have to respect it. And then it makes the passing game a little bit easier. Any team where you're trying to play this one-dimensional passing game, there's just not going to be a lot open for the quarterback. So I do think that even though he still has development to do in terms of the passing game and the reading of NFL defenses, I think that he can be of value in different ways. And the last thing worth noting is that one of the reasons the Chiefs felt good about signing Kenneth Walker is because they have Eric Bieniemy back in their building as their offensive coordinator. And this idea of we're going to have the run schemes and the run protections and all the run fits a little smoother than they've been in recent years. And I think anytime you do that, you feel better about bringing in the running back, and you also feel better about what Justin Fields, either as a starting quarterback or as kind of a gadget piece, will be able to do because of what Eric Bieniemy will complement Andy Reid on.
And no one loves the creative quarterback shovel pass game in the red zone more than Andy Reid. So if we live in a world in which Patrick Mahomes comes off the field in the red zone, which I know Chiefs fans would lose their mind, but Justin Fields becomes this red zone weapon, then this is a trade, and we're going to be midseason all raising a glass to Andy Reid and saying, how the heck did the Chiefs pull this off and get him from the Jets? Well, I mean, the Jets didn't want him anymore. This is the way the world works. And Justin has been the victim of some bad offensive line play over the years. Maybe not so much last year. I think the Jets, with some good drafting, have actually found some O-line pieces, although AVT got hurt early last year for the second straight year. Go back to his rookie year when Fields was in Chicago. Myles Garrett and the Browns once had 9 sacks on the poor kid because the ancient Jason Peters was playing left tackle and getting no help. Like there have been some bad moments. I think this is a good moment for Justin. This is a guy that didn't even want to go to the Pro Bowl when he was like the 15th alternate, when the Pro Bowl is just a flag football game, and he got named a week before and he said, nah, I'm good. And part of it, I'm guessing, is because he didn't want to talk about the Jets. Like, why do I want to meet the media at the Super Bowl and
Right.
be the ninth alternate at a flag game? I'm good. This is a good bounce back, I think, for him. And I think it's going to work. Late in the week last week, the inevitable finally happened. What we've been telling you now for days and weeks would likely happen. And that is Kyler Murray became a Minnesota Viking. Jori. And when asked point blank, are you the starter? He didn't say yes. He said all the right things. But at the same thing, I think all of us now would be absolutely stunned, no matter how much Kevin O'Connell or the Vikings in official or unofficial statements want to use the word compete. This is Kyler Murray's job. It would be the upset of all upsets if J.J. McCarthy goes to camp. And look, I've been surprised before. And unseats Kyler Murray, beats out Kyler Murray, and like delivers a knockout punch where he plays so well in July and August that this is his job. So if it is Kyler Murray, how does it work? He can throw from the pocket. He has more legs than Kevin O'Connell has ever had coaching in the NFL at quarterback. Does he incorporate some
Yep.
of that? Does O'Connell put him in shotgun as much as he was in shotgun? Because that's not necessarily what Drew Petzing wanted to do when he got to Arizona. You have to find the right mix. What does this iteration of the Kevin O'Connell offense with Kyler Murray look like?
Yeah, it's the Kevin O'Connell offense, and it's also the Shanahan-McVay system with perhaps the most athletic quarterback it's seen. I mean, look, when we think about what
Yeah.
Kyle Shanahan wanted to do with Trey Lance when he drafted him, there was a degree of this, and obviously Trey is taller than Kyler Murray, so it's not exact apples to apples, but the idea of a dual-threat quarterback. I had one NFC executive who I was talking to actually when this signing became official who thought there could be some shades of Jordan Love in terms of that mobility. Now, again, not exact, but some of that, hey, you have the mobility, you have that big playmaking. You also have some of the errors and some of the, like, because you are so confident in yourself in a good way, that's what coaches generally want. You might actually have some mistakes as well. Generally around the league, people view Kevin O'Connell as a coach who is flexible enough to scheme to his players' strengths. And so even though I initially doubted this when not really when it had already happened, but in the days when it started to become more likely, I'm like, does that make sense? Does Kyler throwing over the middle as a focus make sense? And then when I talk to people, they say, look, one, Kevin O'Connell is going to work with him on what makes the most sense. And two, the way that that system uses play action and they use wide zone runs, they kind of create these windows. And so those windows should make it more comfortable for Kyler. As it relates to JJ McCarthy, it's interesting because, again, yes, like you said, Kyler said, we're going to compete for this job. But we know that because Kyler Murray was going to be making his $36.8 million this year, regardless of where he played, he picked a position, a team based off football rather than money, which doesn't only mean a team that has a surrounding cast he thinks is going to be good. It means a team he thinks he can start for and play for. Now, it's the perfect front or kind of mask for the Vikings to have when they're talking to JJ McCarthy, because even if JJ can probably read the writing on the wall, there's also this element of, well, technically, because of what the Cardinals are paying, the Vikings are only going to be paying Kyler Murray $1.3 million. So you're not telling JJ you have 0% chance of starting as of March. You're saying, look, go compete. We'll probably give Kyler the ones because, he's got to develop the chemistry with teammates. You've been injured. We should give you a little bit of rest. And there's all these different excuses you can make if you don't feel like you're ready to make the decision. That said, I would be shocked if by week 1 we don't see Kyler Murray starting. The question to me is by week 5 or week 6, who's starting? Because if it goes great for Kyler, he'll keep it. If it doesn't, JJ might have another chance. And while I don't think that we've already seen from JJ what the Vikings need to see out of him to want him out on the field, I also think it's worth noting that we're only 2 years removed from the Panthers benching Bryce Young for Andy Dalton. A couple weeks later, Bryce gets back in the game, albeit because Andy was in a car accident and had a sprained thumb, I think it was. And it worked. He was able to have that reset. So I don't think we should eliminate the chance of JJ McCarthy being able to use a reset like Bryce Young used a reset as kind of a wake-up call, whether for some guys that's schematically and how they can read the defense and just calm down, and for other guys that's how vocal they need to be or how much they need to study. So I think Kyler, it's his job to lose, but I think that both of them will still be in play for the Vikings 2027 and beyond.
It really, and I want to get to 2027. I'm glad you did. we're so far from there right now. But 9 months from now, like if I could fast forward, I want to see how this story ends because let's say hypothetically, Kyler's a former number one overall pick. Right? He's not, I like the Andy Dalton comparison. Andy was a journeyman at that point. He came in and the offense responded to him. Obviously, then the accident, and Bryce got back on the field. He hasn't given that job up. Kyler's a former number one. Yes, they're hardly paying anything, but let's say he plays well. Let's say he takes him to the playoffs. A year from now, you're in a situation in which JJ McCarthy is 3 years into his career and you have no idea what you have. Or maybe you do. Maybe you've already seen enough and you're good. So you're 3 years in. He's a first round quarterback. You then next offseason have to decide on his 5th-year option. But long before that, you have to decide, are we going back to the model that we were trying to get out of in drafting JJ McCarthy? And that is a year by year, big ticket, big price tag, veteran quarterback contract. What they had for years with Cousins, they were trying to get out of it. They let Cousins go. They brought in JJ. And then, oh, wait a minute, we have Darnold. Nah, we're not going to keep Darnold. We're going to let him go. We're going to let Daniel Jones go. We're going to roll with JJ. Okay, that doesn't work. Now we're going to go back to Kyler. And yes, it's not that expensive, but if Kyler plays well and they have a line in this contract that says they cannot tag him, which means if they want to bring him back, they have to write a big check where you made this effort to go cheap, to reset your quarterback room in terms of the contracts and the money spent, and you just totally whiffed on it. Then what? You want Kyler to do well, but it also is kind of a condemnation of your last how many years of the process if he does.
It's a great question, Andrew, because we came about this 2027 quarterback class and how everyone just wants to get to 2027 so they can get their quarterback and have him bridge until then. But if Kyler Murray plays well, I had an NFC executive tell me, quote, if he does well, they won't make the mistake of letting a successful quarterback go again.
Exactly.
No. And so that's the problem, is that they already did this with Sam Darnold. They don't have the luxury of making the mistake again. Now, you make a good point on the tag, because if there wasn't a no tag clause, that would be the perfect answer if I were them, of, hey, tag, get someone in the building, and then you get one. If not, you can trade one of them the next year or something like that. I think it's really, really challenging, but I also think that we might see this year, that maybe Kevin O'Connell's super to play call just works better with the veteran quarterback. And you could say that that's not sustainable for the long term. I also don't think Kyler Murray needs to make $55 million next year if he does well. Like, let's say you pay him $40 million for 2027 because he had a great 2026. Well, the market's going to be $60 million plus at that point. So that's actually possibly quite reasonable. So if you can get a Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield equivalent contract, and by equivalent, I mean obviously adjusted for year over year with the salary cap, then I don't know that that's necessarily a problem and going to keep the Vikings from rebuilding. I think it's a little bit too soon for them to immediately say, well, it's a strong quarterback class, because you know what else was a strong quarterback class? 2024. And we see that, yes, Caleb Williams is doing great from that first round, and Jaden Daniels has played well, and Drake May went Bowl, and Bo Nix has gone to a conference championship. But of the two that haven't, JJ McCarthy is one of the two. And so even if injuries were a factor in that, I don't think you have the luxury to take that chance again.
I think worst case scenario is somewhere in between, in which Kyler shows, moments of the guy that used to be the number one overall pick, or was the number one overall pick, and at one point took the Cardinals to the postseason. Remember, he did also blow his ACL out a couple of years ago. Let's say Kyler doesn't necessarily light the world on fire, and JJ off the bench doesn't necessarily show the signs that he was the guy you took in the first round. And then what? You don't right now have a full-time GM. Maybe you do by that point. Kevin O'Connell then is sitting here kind of with his hands out. Is the pressure then on Kevin O'Connell? I don't think so. There are people that will tell you that the Vikings will get impatient very quickly. They spent a lot of money in free agency last year on the lines, offensive and defensive, and you didn't get any results because your quarterback play was simply not good enough. So it's an interesting year. I think if anyone says that, like, Kevin O'Connell must win this year, I've heard people say that. I laugh at that. Like, go ahead. If you don't want Kevin O'Connell to be 15 teams, there will be teams in the NFL willing to fire their head coach to get Kevin O'Connell. And by the way, don't clip this and say that Kevin O'Connell's on the hot seat. That's not in any way what I'm saying. Saying this is a fascinating study in coach, quarterback. I think the team needs to win right now. Dynamic, whichever quarterback it actually ends up being. If it's a mess this year, what's Justin Jefferson's Super Bowl media tour like in LA? I don't know. I
Yep.
thought he was a really, really good teammate and soldier last year in every form. On the sideline, from what I heard behind the scenes, and certainly when he did interviews. It's one of the low-key fascinating teams in the NFL this year for me.
Well, you know what the Vikings should do if Justin Jefferson's disgruntled, right?
What?
If a year from now he's disgruntled, you agree to trade him to the Baltimore Ravens, and then when the Ravens fail him for a physical, you as the Vikings can welcome Justin Jefferson back with open arms and renewed relationship.
Right, because that's the ultimate reset button, right?
You think we're not great owners, but there's a reason the NFLPA report cards keep giving the Vikings high and top grades, Justin. It could be worse.
Right. All right. Coming up next here on Inside Coverage, we're going to talk to one of our friends in the business. He is a former offensive coordinator. He's a longtime NFL assistant for like 15 years. He is on the road. Like when I say on the road, he's actually on the road. Scott Turner will join us. Coming up next on Inside Coverage. Some people go above and beyond to join the show, and that is what our next guest is doing. Was with the Jets last year, 15 years thereabouts as an NFL assistant, has called plays for the Commanders, has called plays for the Raiders. He is the pride of Oakton High School. He is a Cougar. I am a Seahawk from South Lakes High School. Joining me and Jori Epstein right now is our good friend somewhere off 95 in Connecticut. Scott Turner, where are you?
I think Stamford, Connecticut. I pulled up. I'm heading up to Boston to see some friends, so I pulled off to be on the show to join you guys. So I appreciate you having me on.
Well, we're happy you did it. Stamford, Connecticut, home of the WWE and of NBC Sports. Did you know that?
I did. I thought it was Greenwich. I thought Greenwich was WWE, but I guess we're pretty close. So
I don't know. I mean, I saw the WWE sign right when I was leaving NBC doing the Olympics a couple of weeks ago. I thought it was there. I could be wrong. I spent like a month of my life there, but neither here nor there.
I used to watch it a little when I was a kid. And I just remember Vince McMahon. They always said he was from Greenwich, Connecticut, so that's why I just associated it there.
He probably lived in Greenwich and worked in Stamford, which is a big difference. Whether it's from the side of the highway or wherever you were watching last week, Scott, big picture here. What'd you think of the first couple of days of free agency?
It always comes the same thing, right? Like there's always going to be guys that are quote unquote overpaid, but that's the kind of the cost of doing business in free agency. You saw obviously the Raiders, they had a lot of cap money to spend, and they got a lot of really good players. They seems like they signed a bunch of starters. So they'll be able to, obviously, I think it's no secret who they're going to pick with the first pick, and then they'll be able to not really draft for need, but I thought they did a nice job. And there's always the people that are going to complain because their team didn't necessarily do anything in free agency, and then the other people complain because their team spent too much money. And honestly, the truth's probably somewhere in the middle. On that, I think there are a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of teams that filled some needs or felt like they filled some needs. And the price tag is always big in free agency. That's the point of hitting the market for these players. They risk the injury, maybe not re-signing a deal earlier, and they're rewarded for it because you get people to compete over for you instead of just re-signing with the team you play for. Obviously, the big news was the Max Crosby trade / no trade, which kind of surprised everyone. And you get one of those like every 3 or 4 years where either someone says they're going to sign with someone and signs with someone else, or a trade situation like we had this past week.
Scott, you've been in so many rooms where teams are making free agency decisions, whether it was when you were offensive coordinator or another time. How did you go about determining the way you valued free agency? Or if you only had X number of dollars before you got to the draft, what did you want to prioritize spending it on? Was it about position? Was it about value? Was it about the balance of leadership? Like, what went through your mind?
So, that's a really good question. And I've been, with different teams, and different teams do it differently. Personally, the way I feel is like, um, you know, the you want someone that's going to fill a need. I don't think, you to me, you sign for agency for needs, and then that way you can draft best player available, as much as you possibly can. Um, I always felt like it was in the team's best interest that someone had experience coaching this player, whether it was in college or at a prior team. There's just so many, quote unquote misses in free agency. You give someone a bunch of money, um, they're getting their second contract. If you haven't been around them, you don't know how they are as a person, how they're going to fit in with your team. Then that's where I think a lot of the misses come. So I always felt more comfortable when one of our coaches or personnel guys had experience with the player firsthand, or at least that, or the team that they came from, someone that you really trusted, was there, because that's always, you never really know, when you're signing on for agency, and especially I'm talking specifically about the high price guys, you know,
Yeah.
the player's a human being. So like there's going to be a little bit of, oh wow, we just paid this guy a bunch of money, and then so that you got to make sure they're the right type of guy that it's going to fit in with your locker room. I learned this a while ago. The big thing, it's not about like the money. I mean, it is, but you just want to make sure you're paying the right people, and a lot of times in free agency, because of the price that we're to talk about, like, because of how much you got to pay these guys to compete against other teams, you can end up sometimes paying the wrong people, or just paying the wrong people too much money, I guess I should say.
Scott, Justin Fields, a guy you coached last year with the Jets, just got traded today from the Jets to the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes' recovery up in the air. Obviously, his knee injury, his ACL was late in the season. He says he'll be ready week one, but everyone says they'll be ready week one. Whether it is Mahomes or Justin Fields, week one, doesn't matter at this point. But what do you think of the trade, and how do you think he fits?
I think it's good. I think it's good for Justin. I think it's good for Justin to get in, in that, with that building and everything that they've been associated with as far as winning. I got a lot of respect for Justin. He's dealt with a lot. He's a really, really good person. Obviously, last year it just didn't necessarily work out. He started. We had such a good week one, and then kind of didn't play as well as the season went on, and then dealing with the injury. So that was, it was kind of unfortunate, but, I wish him nothing but the best. It'll be interesting to see how it fits. Obviously, you're talking about Mahomes coming back. I know they signed Jake Hayner, so it's not like they have a lot of experience in the quarterback room outside of, Justin and Mahomes, obviously. And then, obviously, Andy Reid's a very creative coach who's been doing this for a long time. The different wrinkles and different things you can do with Justin because of his ability to be dynamic with the ball in his hands himself. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how they approach it, both with Mahomes being not healthy and then him being healthy. The one thing that's good about this for Justin is, like, in the offseason, he's going to get a ton of reps, um, so that he'll be able to kind of acclimate himself with the offense and the other players, and they'll be able to get evaluation of him and how they feel about, what they feel about what the plan for him is going to be going forward.
Scott, when you think about A.J. Brown and what the Philadelphia Eagles are trying to get in return for a trade of him, I'm curious both how you think of A.J. as a player, how you assess what he's able to do, maybe where he's not 100% relative to what earlier in the career or what he was earlier in his career. And then paired with that, you coached under Josh McDaniels in Las Vegas recently. So if the Patriots were to get A.J. Brown, as we all think is a possibility given the Mike Vrabel connection and given Stephon Diggs leaving New England, how would A.J. Brown fit into Josh McDaniels' offense?
Well, I think A.J. Brown is one of the top receivers in this league, and I think he still is. I don't think that there's been any real drop off. Their offense, they're prioritized running the football. I know he's been frustrated with his lack of targets, or what, however you want to say it, like their lack of the ability to get him the ball. I think if he, ended up there with Josh, I think it'd be outstanding. I think it'd be, I'm not saying that AJ Brown is Randy Moss, but I think it'd be similar to when Randy Moss went to the Patriots in 2007, as that vertical threat. Obviously, Drake May, one of his biggest strengths is throwing the ball down the field. And I mean, AJ is just such a big physical guy. The further he gets down the field, those DBs, they're lost. They're either going to tackle him, or he's going to go make the play because of his physicality. Obviously, he can still run away from people with the ball in his hands. So I think he'd be a great fit in the defense, both because of the schematically, what Josh likes to do, but then also just because of the personnel and playing with Drake May, who's such a great downfield passer.
Curious, Scott, with AJ, he made, obviously, he had some passive aggressive social media posts. Let's put it that way. Last year, it was well documented in Philadelphia.
He's a receiver.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
that's what I'm getting at. As a play caller, let's say you're one of the other 31 that, let's say, concentrated for him. Do you look at him and go, "Oh, we want to give him a fresh start, bring him here"? Or as a play caller, do you go, "Man, do I really want to deal with this"?
Yeah, I think there's always you always weigh all the pros and cons, and that's part of it. With a player like, to his ability, you can deal with it. You have a plan for him. You trust your coaches as far as the receiver coach, that you're gonna be able to deal with it. And a lot of times, like, that stuff in the building isn't as a big a deal as it seems like outside of the building. You know what I mean? A guy makes a post and it's like, all right, that's just, AJ being AJ, or you have a conversation about it and then you move on, because everyone's busy and everyone's trying to win. And as long as, again, I don't know AJ, I know people that have been around him that really like him. And people that have coached him before, and again, they've said positive things about him. And a lot of times it's just he's frustrated, and that's his way of venting. And as long as you can have a conversation about it, and then you kind of move on. I think you just have to confront the issues as they come. As you go, the thing you don't want to do is kind of let it fester. But like a lot of times, it gets brought up, and then it gets talked about on all these different shows. Whereas, like, it's getting talked about Thursday and Friday of a tweet he sent out, Sunday night, and they already had the conversation Monday, and they're on to whatever the next opponent is. So I don't see it as a big of a deal, as long as you feel good about the player and you're going to do your research, like I said. Feel good about just the interactions in the building on a day-to-day basis, and that he wants the ball, but that he's going to want to win, and be a good teammate. And those are the things you talk to people that within the league, have those conversations, and then you make a decision about it.
Yeah, Scott, I'm glad you mentioned that idea of, like, when a player's having some discord with the team, what happens next? Because you spent 2023 and 2024 in Las Vegas. Max Crosby and AJ Brown are very different players. But when we see what happened last week with Max Crosby, do you think there's a chance it almost, like, reinstills some trust with the Raiders? Because what the Ravens did to him, is a great way to kill trust really quickly. So I guess take us through what you know about Max's dynamic with the franchise from your time there, and based off that, what you think will happen to him this season or where he'll be playing.
Yeah. So when I was with Max, I always felt like he'd be a Raider for life. I didn't think they'd ever let him leave that building. He has a house in Vegas. He wants to be there. I don't know what happened this past season. I know that, that whether they shut him down and he didn't want to get shut down, or all those rumors, I don't know. And I never asked anybody that I knew in the building. But for whatever reason, that trust was broken. Now it's a whole new coaching staff coming in. I know the GM's still there. But Max, truly wants to be great. I've never seen someone as committed as he is just to be great. he's literally the first guy in the building every day. As far as a player, you walk in the cafeteria at 5:45 in the morning, and he's sitting in the exact same spot. He details his meals like they weigh it out by the gram. Like that's how intense he is about like his diet. Obviously, like you go in there. I mean, I guarantee you go in the building right now in Vegas, he's in there, and 6 o'clock in the morning in the off season, and when the players aren't even supposed to be there, and he's working out, doing the little things he needs to do. He practices as intense as anybody I've been around. So, these things. I mean, this is an extreme example of the statement. These things happen, but like, it's a business, and then sometimes the business and the football get kind of muddled, and that's kind of what happened here. A lot of times, feelings get hurt or people get offended with some of the business practices, but everything I've been a part of, once that stuff gets settled, and the good players, and Max isn't a good player, Max is a great player, they understand that they got a job to do, and they want to be great for themselves and the organization, and he'll be fine. I mean, no matter what happens, and it looks like, what it looks like, he's going to be there. And I hope that, for him, and for Clint Kubiak and all those guys there, because obviously he's a great player and you're going to find many people like him. So, but again, whatever happens, like he's gonna prepare, and he's gonna be ready to play, and he's gonna be a captain of the team, whether it's at the Raiders or he goes to a new team, he'll be a captain there. So, I don't worry about him as far as that. Now, again, do conversations need to be had? Like, are they going to smooth stuff over? Yeah, I'm sure that stuff's probably already taken place. But but most guys, once everyone hashes it out, and they get their feelings out, then people can move on pretty quickly.
Yeah, I could also imagine. Let's say he does stay there. Let's say a trade isn't made. He's a Raider. The sound from that building, the sound from those fans, from the black hole, whatever you want to call it now, in the new stadium, when he runs out of the tunnel for their first home game, is going to be ridiculous. I mean,
Yeah,
whether
no,
whether you hate the Raiders or love the Raiders, it'll be a cool moment.
no, it absolutely will, and they'll be excited, obviously, to have I know the fans will be excited that Max Crosby's still in the silver and black. The problem is it's all away fans. Everyone just comes in from to Vegas. Everyone. The problem is in the stadium. Everyone comes in because that's the one game everyone's got circled on their calendar. They want to go. They want to go to Vegas. So that's the home field advantage. I think they got to start. Turn it around, which I think they will, and start winning some games before they get the mostly silver and black at Allegiant Stadium.
I've been there a couple of times, Scott, and I feel the same way. And I don't know how, obviously winning changes it, but the way it's become a tourism, and you knew when you moved the team there, this is what was going to happen. Every road team, that fan base circles it on their calendar, and they say, we want to go there. And it is the most expensive ticket in the NFL on the resale market. And the Raiders are very proud of this. Right? Hey, look at us. We're the team that everybody wants to see. It's because all these other fans are coming in and they're jacking the ticket prices up because this is their like one buddy vacation of the entire year.
For sure. And it is the most expensive ticket, and they make that stadium in the NFL. They make the most money. They have the best, biggest profit every year too. They're doing a great job. I mean, I coached there for 2 years, and I've been to every stadium. To me, it's the nicest. It's not like Lambeau's the coolest because it's going into Lambeau, but it's the nicest stadium in the NFL. Like it's a great place.
Absolutely. When you look at the Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers availability right now, or seeming availability, what do you think happens with that, Scott? I mean, if you're Pittsburgh, are you just wanting Aaron back? If you're Kirk, is it Vegas? Is it Indianapolis? Somewhere where you have a chance to at least start a few games? I mean, if you were the quarterbacks and the teams, how are you fixing this, or how are you settling it?
I think Kirk. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to go to Pittsburgh or not play. You know what I mean? He's going to go somewhere where he's going to, again, get another full season as a starter. And then I think Kirk, like, he's made a lot of money in his career. And I think he wants to go play somewhere. So like you said, whether it's the Raiders where he can go start while they're getting the kid ready, he's got some familiarity with the system, and then, or I don't know about Indianapolis, but I think it's going to be somewhere. I don't think Kirk's going to go somewhere to be a backup. I think he's going to go somewhere to be a starter, even if it's a quote unquote bridge starter um, for a young player. And I think he'll know what he's getting into this time. He didn't anticipate being a bridge starter in Atlanta. I think everyone was surprised by the Penix pick,
Right.
where this time I think he'll go in there understanding, hey, I'm going to go there. I'm going to start hopefully for a full season, maybe not. But I think what's obvious to me is that he loves playing football. So I think he wants to go somewhere where he can actually go play.
Which right now would be Arizona, potentially, unless they stun the world and go take Ty Simpson somewhere. Probably not at 4,
Right.
but somewhere in the bottom if they were to trade back in, or in the second round. Like, if I'm Kirk, I'd probably wait. That's just me.
Yeah.
But
I think that's probably true too, because he's obviously already been kind of snake bit by that situation before. But yeah, I mean, and someone like, even if they drafted Ty Simpson, like he's probably, and I haven't done a ton of the evaluations yet, looking at these quarterbacks, but like he's younger, like at least Mendoza, I don't think they want to start him right away, but at least he's an older guy.
Yeah.
So I think either one of those guys aren't necessarily going to start right away. So I don't think that would kill it either for him.
And like we said last week, like the Kirk Cousins, Fernando Mendoza, like buddy driving to work show in Vegas, like the two most anti-Vegas guys of all time. Not anti-Vegas, but they're not the party guys. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, you're not, when you think of Las Vegas, you don't think of those two guys. I understand what you're saying.
I don't think of like the bachelor party movies or anything like that.
No.
Yeah. It would be fun. This has been fun. Scott Turner, who pulled off 95 in what looks like rainy, or is that snowy Connecticut?
It's raining. Yeah, it's raining up here. We got some weather in the Northeast, so hopefully the rest of this drive won't be too bad. I got like 2 hours left, so
beautiful.
Shouldn't be too bad.
Let you get back on the road.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time to join us.
No, thanks for having me, guys.
And our listeners a little bit. Glad everyone can learn from you.
Yeah, no, I'd love to do it again sometime too. Appreciate it.
Let's do it again. Scott Turner, everybody. Inside coverage on Yahoo. Roll it on. Thanks to Scott Turner, who is a free agent, and there are still many free agents out there. I'm Andrew. That is Jori. We are technically not free agents. We are happy here to, however, talk about free agency. Jori, I mentioned earlier that I think there are still 4 quarterbacks right now on the market that will start games in 2026. I think Kirk Cousins, that we just talked about with Scott, will start a game. I think Joe Flacco will start games. I think Aaron Rodgers, assuming he comes back and he is a Pittsburgh Steeler, will start games. And then there's Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, if Matthew Stafford, if he goes back to LA and Stafford stays healthy, then Jimmy's not going to get on the field unless the Rams have everything wrapped up. And it's roll Jimmy out there for week 18. Sean McVay's done that plenty of times. He used to do it annually with Sean Mannion, now the offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles. But I think those are the 4. And there are certainly big names at wide receiver still out there. Keenan Allen or Stephon Diggs or Jawan Jennings. Christian Kirk today signed with the San Francisco 49ers. He was with the Texans last year. Low-key good move. But the quarterbacks, obviously, I think will drive the news cycle the rest of the way. Do we agree it's Steelers or bust for Rodgers?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think that specifically since Thursday night, which is when Kyler Murray made it official with the Minnesota Vikings. To me, the teams in play were pretty much the Minnesota Vikings, which we know Aaron Rodgers was highly interested in last year, both because of Kevin O'Connell and because of their surrounding cast on the weapons side. And also, quite frankly, having a great defense takes a lot of pressure off a quarterback at his age. And then the Steelers, obviously, not only did he have a good experience with them in 2024, but he would be reuniting with Mike McCarthy, who was his head coach in Green Bay for 13 years. What's interesting, and I don't think this will be relevant, but our colleague Charles Robinson was wise to point out, Nathaniel Hackett, who is a good buddy of Aaron Rodgers and who he brought together with him to the Jets, is in Arizona right now with the Cardinals under Mike LaFleur, who, by the way, is the brother of Matt LaFleur, who was Aaron's head coach at the end of his time in Green Bay. I still am not convinced that Aaron wants to play so badly that he'll start over with a new team in Arizona that's kind of in a rebuild. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. The Steelers' free agency is much more shaped to an Aaron Rodgers year if he decides to go there, or even to a Kirk Cousins year if Aaron Rodgers decides to retire. I think Arizona's maybe 5%, 10% chance, and then most likely feels like Steelers 1, retirement 2, followed by Arizona now that Minnesota is off the table.
You know, the Arizona thing's interesting. I reached out to a league source maybe 10 days ago before the start of free agency, and I made the same connecting of dots as you did. I think we might have had the same conversation on the air 2 weeks ago, because I said, look, there's McBride, there's Harrison, there's Wilson. They're in position to take Jeremiah Love if they wanted to take Jeremiah Love. There's a LaFleur calling plays. I know the defense needs work, but it's only an hour flight to Los Angeles. Like there are
Right.
There are reasons to say, as you laid out, that it makes sense. So I reached out to a league source who generally has a good feel on the quarterback carousel. And I said, any chance of Rodgers in Arizona? And I got back quite quickly, one word, no. I'm like, okay.
I
didn't follow up. Now, this was 2 weeks ago. A lot can change. I tend to believe this person, and I kind of feel the same way. But it makes sense unless you understand that if Rodgers were to come back, he would want to win. You and I kind of read the McAfee thing the same way. We read it as he was kind of asking the Steelers to bring him back, like saying publicly, "Hey, I'm here. There's no offer, and we're waiting."
Yeah, I would say he was asking the Steelers why there was not a contract, and also reminding the Vikings of his availability, because as I noted at the time, it happened to be that Kyler Murray posted his goodbye, and then Aaron Rodgers, who hadn't done the Pat McAfee show since training camp, not since the end of the season, since training camp, the morning after Kyler Murray, his biggest competition for the Minnesota job, became available, he was like, all right, okay, let me just remind everyone that I am here, that I am available, and here's what I have to offer. So I definitely think those are of interest to him. But I agree with you. The Arizona thing just doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think that Aaron is going to want a certain degree of infrastructure if he's going to play this year. And that infrastructure is much more in Pittsburgh. To me, the question is probably less, is Pittsburgh interested in him at all? I don't think people there are particularly confident that Will Howard is already ready to play. And I like Will Howard, great kid. And he's very well respected and liked in the Pittsburgh building. He's also still quite green and young. But I think that they kind of need him. And so I think Aaron's banking a little bit on the fact that the Pittsburgh free agency approach has been kind of these older guys extending Cam Hayward. Let's maximize TJ Watt. And the end of his career, or at least the remaining part of his career. You have an owner in Art Rooney who said, we don't want to rebuild. And then you have a team who doesn't really have a quarterback now. But I don't know that Aaron Rodgers wants to play for the discount he played for last year, because I think he's kind of saying, you need me more than you needed me last year. Last year, I needed someone after the Jets, and I just needed a cleanse. Now I think he believes the Steelers do need him. And also, by the way, if they want someone in 2027, we keep talking about this 2027 quarterback class, Aaron is someone, not a bridge in the sense of he's necessarily going to bring your 2027 guy along, but he is a bridge as he can close that gap. Now, the one question I would have is, while I don't think the Steelers are going to go all in on Will Howard this year, because Art Rooney has made very clear he doesn't want this rebuild year, don't you want to know what you have in Will Howard before you go into the 2027 class?
Yes and no. I also think we're falling, not you, but like collectively here, falling into the trap of like overhyping a 6th round pick. Well, I like Will Howard too. I got to know him a little bit. I got to know him. I interviewed him. I did a production meeting with him before the one Ohio State game I called 2 years ago for NBC. We all know what he did. Won a national championship. I like Will Howard. I like him a lot. But he's a 6th round pick. Like, the Steelers don't owe him anything. And it's not Kyler versus top 10 pick JJ McCarthy. That's not what we're talking about here. Now, you could argue if you want that you liked Will Howard more in college between Kansas State and Ohio State than you saw anything JJ McCarthy do. That's fine. That's a different conversation. But he's a sixth-round pick. It's not as if they have some major investment in him. I think there is just a chance that if it isn't Aaron Rodgers, they make a hard pivot in the draft and try to go get someone to start this year, whether it's Ty Simpson as a rookie who probably isn't ready, or I don't know, is there another bold move to be? Is there a Kirk Cousins bold move out there? I don't think so. Is there a Jimmy Garoppolo move? I think unlikely. I find it hard to believe that a team that wants to make the playoffs, that thinks it can make the playoffs, doesn't do the math and say, Aaron was good last year, but he's only going to be a year older. Like, if you really confidently believe that Aaron is going to be good enough to be a playoff quarterback next year, I might question your judgment. So then where are you? They're in no man's land. They're picking 21st again.
Yeah, I can't totally tell what we should expect from Aaron Rodgers this year because I do think he had flashes last year. I do think in that game at Baltimore, right after he turned 42, he looked really strong. He also obviously had a lot of struggles, particularly after fracturing his left wrist and particularly in the playoff game against the Houston Texans. One thing I'd push back on, though, Andrew, is when you say, well, do we really need to know what Will Howard is and he's the 185th pick? Well, everyone keeps saying we need to know what Shedeur Sanders was this past year, and he was the 144th pick and not even the top quarterback picked in his class for that team. I'm not saying necessarily in 2026 as much because they did get 7 games of him, but I think that this is a common conversation if someone has some success at the NFL level, and I get that Shedeur might have been more productive over a longer course of time, but Will Howard did win a national championship, not unlike J.J. McCarthy winning the national championship, and so I think that was one of the reasons the Vikings last year said, hey, we can roll with this guy. Granted, again, yes, he had the traits. He was a first-round pick. But when you have a level of success at the college level, then teams do want to say, well, maybe he can have it at the NFL level. Maybe we found a steal. Maybe he's the Dak Prescott or one of these other guys who you find in a later round and ends up starting for you for 10 years.
Yeah. They're all good points there. Jimmy Garoppolo's thing is kind of up in the air, certainly. Joe Flacco, I think, will start games this year. Whether or not he'll be given a fair chance to win a starting job, I find that somewhat unlikely, at least as we sit here today on the 16th of March. Other names out there, I mentioned the wide receivers, Diggs, Allen, Debo. I think they'll all contribute this year. I don't think they're game changers or season changers or big contract players at this point in their career. Jori, what are you hearing on an A.J. Brown deal? Because a week into free agency, he's still very much a Philadelphia Eagle.
Yeah, I'm surprised that A.J. Brown is still a Philadelphia Eagle, and quite a few people around the league who I talked to are also surprised. They expected there to be a trade in the first week of free agency because he's a major piece. He's still one of the top receivers in the game, like Scott was telling us when we had him on the show today. And there's kind of this idea, and as Scott mentioned, when you often want in free agency to take a guy or to sign a guy that has played for one of your coaches before, there are obvious fits for A.J. Brown, like we see with Mike Vrabel, who he played for the Tennessee Titans. The catch here that I actually didn't realize until today is the way the Eagles have structured A.J. Brown's contract creates a situation that if they trade him before June 1st, they'll have to take, it's my understanding, about $43 million in dead cap, not just on their salary cap, but specifically in 2026. And so if they do that now, they can't sign and they can't take on certain other arrangements for this year. Now, I asked someone the same way we see all these guys who are cut and released and designated a post-June 1st release, why can't we just do that? Why can't you just designate him a post-June 1st trade? But apparently that's not a mechanism. And so I think it's worth noting that if he were to be traded, you can't use your own you can't execute a trade that includes the 2026 draft and designate him a post-June 1st. And so, yes, they can just decide that they have enough resources, they still want to do a trade sooner. But if they want to avoid this $43 million dead cap hit for this season specifically and taking it all right now, they can't do a trade that involves the 2026 draft.
And of course, that just means a nightmare scenario for NFL reporters because between like June 15th, when mandatory minicamp rather wraps up, and July 15th, like that 1 month in there where the entire league takes a vacation, if there isn't an AJ Brown trade, or at least some closure, like a formal
Yeah.
announcement, guys, he's not getting traded, he's staying here. I mean, believe me, the griping, not that fans should care about griping, you should not, by the way, but from the reporters, the insiders, if you will, that have to cover this thing, if it isn't wrapped up, it's going to be overwhelming. Let's just put it that way. Biggest surprises here in free agency. Jori, mine is the Denver Broncos. I've heard this a lot from, I know Frank said it last week as well, reporting from our Denver bureau about like, why haven't the Broncos done more? They've done nothing. And this is a team that made it to the AFC Championship game that if Bo Nix had been healthy, I think would have won that game if Jarrett Stidham and Sean Payton hadn't gone for it in the first half and not gotten for it. If they had gotten it rather on that fourth down, I think they still win that game. Their losses: Jonathan Franklin Myers. John Franklin Myers, a good defensive lineman. Dre Greenlaw, although Dre hardly played last year. PJ Locke. Their additions: basically nothing. Nothing. They brought back J.K. Dobbins. Like not much else. You wanted them to go get a tight end, hasn't happened. You wanted to get maybe another wide receiver, it hasn't happened. You wanted them to do anything, it has not happened. And it is it is not very Sean Payton to sit on his hands in free agency. He and Mickey Loomis rewrote salary cap rules back in the day in New Orleans to such a degree that right now they are celebrating in New Orleans that they are doing free agent contracts there with the Saints and Kellen Moore's second year that don't have void years. Like they're just clean deals. They are out from under all the salary cap shenanigans that have been done by the previous administration, at least coaching staff. Not that Sean wrote the deals, Mickey wrote the deals, but you get my point. The Broncos are not doing any of that right now. What are you hearing on them, if anything?
Yeah, I'm not hearing much. I would be curious what they think about Bo Nix's recovery timeline, though, and whether that's impacting. I also think that they have spent in recent years, years that they spent on the offensive line, years that they spent to acquire. And so some years you kind of got to reset. But you would think that as long as you are this close, you made it to the conference championship and you have a quarterback on a rookie contract, you would think you would want to be maximizing your window a little more aggressively. It's also possible, I will say, Sean Payton, and I know every team is a little bit different in their player analysis and how they go about assessing what they think is a player's strengths. I do think from the conversations I've had with Sean Payton that what he's looking for in players is sometimes different than other teams, the same way that he was way higher on Bo Nix than most people were. Mm-hmm. There are certain skills that he just values way less than people around the league do, and there are other elements of a guy's game that he values way more. So it could be that they felt, hey, do we really want to pay Tyler Linderbaum $27 million, even if he's a great player? Or, hey, Jalen Phillips, a great edge rusher, but $30 million a year, given his injury history, is a huge risk. And so it could be that some of these risks that people are willing to take based off a certain set of traits and upside might not be what Sean is actually looking for.
Yeah, totally here. I agree. And my last, I'll call it surprise. I guess I'm not surprised, but we'll call it a surprise. Like, I don't know about you, what you did this past weekend, but out and about around LA, I went to the tennis tournament in Indian Wells out in Palm Springs as well. Like, no matter where I go, people still want to talk about the Max Crosby thing. I know it's less than a week old. It's still very fresh, but even friends at dinner on Friday night that don't necessarily know football or care had heard of this story and wanted the tea, so to speak, and wanted to know what I thought and wanted to know what the real story was. This is one of those stories where I don't know that we still know. I don't think even close to know the full truth. And it is one of those stories that is going to continue throughout the offseason. The first time Max does an interview, whether it's on his own pod or maybe he shows up at the Brady flag football thing this coming weekend in Southern California, whatever and wherever, people are still trying to get to the bottom of this. And joking aside, there will be a documentary made one day about what went down between the Raiders and the Ravens and Max Crosby.
Absolutely. When you were saying I don't think we know the full story yet. I was going to say I'm not sure we'll ever know the full story. And then I was picturing an oral history of sorts, kind of like you're saying, a documentary in
Yeah.
20 to 30 years. That's when we'll actually fully understand what happens. And Eric DeCosta will be like, well, when I realized Trey Hendrickson's availability, or when I had this conversation with this person, and there will be some twist that we totally didn't realize that influenced their thinking. What was surprising to me is that I was expecting a little bit more uniform of perspective when I talked to league sources and reached out to people in other front offices in terms of how they felt about this botched Max Crosby trade. And yet I had some people in front offices who were like, it's not that crazy that the Ravens would have wanted Trey Hendrickson atop Max Crosby. Why not go all in on the position? Pass rusher was a weakness. They had the money set aside for Tyler Linderbaum, and it was available when Tyler went to the Raiders. We have no reason not to take them at their word. And then I talked to people in other front offices who are more of the mindset that absolutely no way are the Ravens not lying about this. Trey Hendrickson was their backup plan when they decided they didn't want the first round picks or weren't comfortable, even though the medical information didn't change. And interestingly, I got those opposing opinions from people at teams that actually were both very aggressive. So it wasn't just the aggressive teams being like, oh, we could see someone else being aggressive, and the conservative teams feeling otherwise. There was a mix in terms of where this was coming from. So as we've mentioned, there's not going to be any repercussions, but I was fascinated, and I thought it was such a interesting sociological and anthropological moment for the NFL to see how people reacted to this trade, what they thought happened, and whether or not they cared.
Yeah, the one that I don't get, and I've heard this a lot, was, well, the second they signed Trey Hendrickson, it proved funny business with Max Crosby's physical. Like that's illogical. Now, both might be true, sure. Like, I mean, that might be true, but like, roll with this for a second. If, let's say, you went in with an open mind, hoping to do the deal, you got through Max Crosby's physical and went, no, we don't want to do this. Like, this is bad. Just hypothetically, this is bad. We don't want to do this. Well, at that point, logically, it makes sense to panic and pivot and go, oh my God, Trey's still out there? Okay, we're going to overpay. Like the deal that we didn't want to give him and that no team had wanted to give him through the first couple of days of free agency, we will now give him and do so eagerly and excitedly because we don't have Max Crosby anymore. So whatever the price is, we'll pay it. Like that certainly is a logical possibility. But there are people out there that think by signing Trey Hendrickson, this proves there is funny business with the physical. I'm like, no, maybe that's
But
the
Andrew,
case, but that
you're kind of
one
talking
doesn't
about
prove
this
the other.
You're kind of talking about this as two different things, though, and going back to the idea of a physical and a failed physical is not binary. And I know that you don't think it's binary,
Yes.
and I know you're saying the discomfort, but I kind of disagree with the way you're coming from it because to me, it's directly related. It's a cause effect. The cause is, hey, we don't want to pay 2 first-round picks for a guy who doesn't have the longevity in his knee. Okay, well, now we're going to overpay Trey Hendrickson and make it happen.
Yes.
But you weren't paying that kind of deal to Trey Hendrickson before. Maybe you were paying a 1-year deal.
You were
Maybe
not.
you were going to try and convince him. But I don't know. I still think that if the same way that you weren't paying it for Trey that, I also am not sure you were failing Max Crosby in his physical if Trey Hendrickson had already signed with another team, because then maybe you're like, oh, well, we have Lamar Jackson. We only for sure have him under contract for 2 more years, or assuming that he doesn't get traded. And so if that's the case, we need to maximize this window, even if in 2 years we don't have this Max Crosby trade. And so I think that there is an element of the Max Crosby deal might have still been on if Trey Hendrickson was not available.
Maybe. We don't know. We don't know. What the other thing that drives me nuts is those who say, well, they had the scans. There's absolutely nothing you could have seen in person. Like you had all the information examining him in person. There was no extra information. I'm like, seriously? Really? I'm not a doctor here, but I do know that doctors prefer to see the patient as opposed to just diagnosing somebody via email, right? It's always better to see the patient, like have more information, not less information. I kind of push back against that. If not, then it's telemedicine for all of us moving forward. Never see your doctor. Just email them and text them. Put them in a Dropbox for security's sake. Text them your scans and results and just wait for them to email you back. and tell you how to go about your life and treat your injuries and ailments. I don't know. I'm not taking the Ravens side in this. I promise you, I'm not blindly defending anyone here. It's just the jumping to conclusions, as you said, without the information. Like, we may never know. It's all speculation, but people are so passionate about their speculation.
Yeah, there were some funny lines, though, that Trey Hendrickson had in his introductory press conference just about what it felt like to play with the family and the amount of trust in the Ravens organization, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, I don't know, kid, maybe give it a week.
Or were those veiled shots at the Bengals?
Oh, he definitely made very clear that he needed a fresh start and that it was even harder on his family to be in Cincinnati than it was on him, which, as he said, was saying something. So, yes, plenty of shots at the Bengals.
Yes. So there's that as well. All right. There's a show. You hear the siren. The siren means it is the end of another edition of Inside Coverage. Jori Epstein in New York. Yours truly in Los Angeles. Thank you for listening to and watching this edition. We are back on Wednesday, where maybe Aaron Rodgers will make up his mind, or maybe the Steelers will make up their minds about Aaron Rodgers. We'll see you then.